This presentation aims to look at the feasibility of developing a framework for localizing assistive technologies and also online technologies that disabled users may find difficult to access. That means making technologies suitable for any culture and language. Those of us working on the project have come from as far afield as Mumbai in India, Doha in Qatar, Stockholm in Sweden and Southampton in the UK. This has meant that we are all experiencing very different cultures, languages and learning situations, and in particular the way assistive technologies are used within these environments. Whilst developing the framework, we've been on a journey, that of discovering not only the way localization impacts on the development of assistive technologies, but also looking at the way assistive technologies work with web pages, e-texts, e-books and mobile in different countries. We've had to develop an understanding and to translate what we've learned into the requirements for the development of particular technologies. The word translate has two meanings in this case, that of moving from one language to another, as well as taking user needs and developing suitable technologies. It's important that the users are with us at all points on this journey, not just at the end when we're asking them to test our ideas. Having gathered requirements for development, whether it's to make actual tools or to evaluate how easy it is for someone to access a website, there is a need to communicate the concepts and to check a specification is in place that will actually fit local cultures, languages, skills, environment and the tasks being undertaken. But why is localization so important? The world is growing smaller, thanks in part to technology, and therefore there's been more collaboration between groups. In our case, this has been the development of a web browser toolbar and a desktop application. These tools and others that the team have been using have provided us with case studies to help us learn more about localization. As an example of the use of assistive technology and how differences in particular countries occur, in Qatar, it was found that there was a gap in the awareness of what could be achieved with the use of assistive technology, especially those with learning difficulties. And in part, this has also been experienced in the UK, where recent research has shown that students transitioning from school to higher education have not necessarily understood the meaning of assistive technology. Perhaps it is not surprising that we find it hard to describe what assistive technology really is. We tend to say it's any tool, device or software that will help someone who is disabled, and yet we're all using assistive technology, from glasses to mobile phones that provide alarms and calendars. Perhaps it's rather more helpful to look at assistive technologies as a range of items that go from access tools to the personalization and accessibility options of technology encompassing productivity tools, such as word processors, right down to the free, portable and online technologies available. So the screen reader may be at the top of the triangle, perhaps an expensive piece of software providing access to computerized technologies for the blind. The next layer for the productivity tools include spell checkers, word prediction, and items that speed up the way we work. And finally, there are the open source and portable apps and programs that can also require localizing, but may often be the items that can support those who cannot afford the expensive technologies at the top of the triangle. So with these ideas in mind, we looked at the cultural nuances around the world and the impact they had on the development of technology. Having said that, we were only able to look at the basics. But there are researchers that divide the world into different cultural areas. There are others like Geert Hofstede, who decide to use the terms dimensions rather than regions, and offer different explanations, under 6 headings in this case, for these variations. We translated 6 of these dimensions into aspects of assistive technology use. And we found that under power distance, this was relevant in terms of the acceptance of expert advice when choosing devices. So for instance, in India and Qatar, there would be high scores in this area. But in the UK and Sweden, lower scores occurred where a user may also be considered as an expert when seeking help. In terms of individualism, there were high scores in Sweden and UK, as a high value is put on independence, as opposed to considering dependence within a community, as in Qatar and India. It's important to realise that these are all incredible generalisations, and in terms of long-term orientation, there aren't even any scores for Qatar. In India, there is more acceptance of assistive technologies that have already been used by others, rather than a wish to perhaps trial and experiment with the latest offerings, such as might be the case in Sweden and the UK. Under the heading of indulgence, there are yet to be any scores, and in a way, it's felt that the comments in these sections replicate the ones that are linked to those who wish to use tools and devices that are similar to other people, to their peers, which is actually perhaps the case across many cultures. Under the heading of cultural appropriateness, we've learnt that the way we speak or the way we write is not just about translation, but also down to the social nuances, such as the opening phrases in a conversation or greetings. The researcher Kaplan has provided images to illustrate these nuances. The directness of English, the formal and expressive Arabic openings when beginning a conversation, perhaps talking around a subject when you're in China or Japan, and the not so direct French and Russian languages. Rather, as with the cultural dimensions, one wonders how appropriate some of these images are. But it's important to always consider use of the most polite terms, avoiding acronyms and words with double meanings, as well as making sure images used illustrate something written and leave no doubt as to the meaning, whatever the culture. In terms of addressing design, the look and feel of any item should adhere to the culture once again. Those elements including colour, graphics, symbols and layout are all very important, and flexibility in design is essential. Language has a huge impact on layout, so you may have tiny menus for Chinese, but need up to 25% more space for Portuguese, Spanish, German or even French. You may need larger fonts for Arabic so that you can decipher individual characters, as this language is always written in the cursive style. The breaks in sentences and paragraphs are going to be different depending on the language, and white space can help enormously. It's important to think of your print-impaired readers, not just those who are blind, but also those who may have dyslexia. So contrast levels and the way text flows may also have an impact. English tends to have left justification, whereas it's been found that full justification in Arabic with increased spacing can aid reading. Translating text is not always easy, in particular where terminology is complex and technical, which is invariably the case when developing software programs. It helps to have a glossary of terms as a separate file. No hard coding, so changes can be made by linguists at any time. You may choose to do your translation by crowdsourcing or volunteers, or to employ a professional company. It's not wise to depend on automatic translation alone unless you know the language and can make corrections. Always double check what has been translated by reverse translating so that you can see the differences. The technical issues that arise with localization depend on the operating system, as well as the device being used. But there are some key elements that need to be taken into account, such as the use of Unicode and UTF-8 coding, keyboard access with localized controls, appropriate on-screen support and recognition for built-in assistive technologies, as well as those that will be personal to the user. Development without regard to the potential user is a real problem. People underestimate the skills and ability of most disabled users. There is a need to incorporate flexible alternatives and universal design whilst also addressing the practicalities of the activities undertaken within a particular environment. Developers need to understand the accessibility options available and constantly be aware that users can help with testing. When thinking about the technologies that might be needed in the Arabic world, it soon became clear that there were very few free and open source technologies to support disabled users of computers. There are also few good quality free text-to-speech voices available at present. Speech recognition and optical character recognition remain a challenge, other than for commercial companies. Free symbol sets for those who find it hard to communicate have yet to be developed fully in Arabic, and there's a need for community support to enhance translations and to disseminate information about assistive technology. The MADA portal has been set up to help with this process, and we have all harnessed the power of social networking, including YouTube, to create a network of support. For the development of sound products and services, a basic localization framework has been developed that involves the user at the outset in order to discover the cultural contexts, the environment, and the impact of language on design, as well as translation issues and individual needs that will depend on the activities they're doing and their skills. The framework allows us to see each of the important elements that make up the process of developing assistive technologies in different languages, but it doesn't cover all aspects of use, and during development it will always be important to look at other aspects of software development, such as licensing that goes with open source software, how it will continue in its development, its maintenance, and the agreements made for any changes. There is a need to constantly revisit aspects of the development process. In the AT bar case, this is about looking for new voices, checking for errors in translation, correcting image, language used in help files, constantly testing and communicating with users to maintain feedback. When the desktop version of the AT bar was developed, we discovered that the text-to-speech was going to be the main issue if it was to become a free resource. Should it just be developed for Windows with the move to mobile technologies, or should we be thinking mobile first? We'll also be needing to look at responsive design for the differences between the tablet and the phone, so that AT bar will work with web apps in the future. All documentation is very important, but it must remain open and available to everyone in a variety of accessible formats, as well as the provision of different languages. We used MediaWiki, WordPress, and GitHub. Obviously, email also plays a big part, so there is a provision for a contact for both languages. Solutions tend to come with collaborative working, writing good code, and sharing multiple means of engagement. That makes it sound easy, but there's been a lot of research that has also gone into the work we have done, and I have listed some of the papers and websites that have helped us arrive at this point. I hope this has been helpful, and please browse our new localization website and provide us with feedback. The URL is http:// localization.atbar.org/.